In this video, we'll be talking about the classic novel, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, written in 1932, and it is one of my favorite novels, probably. It was a great read, and I've been wanting to make a video about it for quite some time now, and I finally done it. I've written up some scripts here. We are going to be discussing, and analyzing the book, really. I will be providing a quick summary of it, and I'll be asking the question, are we living in a brave new world? How close is our society to Huxley's society that he wrote about in this book? And in the beginning, I'll be providing a spoiler-free analysis and the description of the book, in case you want to read the book before watching this video, which I do highly recommend. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty details of it and really digging deep. So yeah, let's get into it. This book depicts a dystopian society, and even dystopian, this is also an open question about the book. How dystopian is it? But we'll get into that later. It's often compared to George Orwell's 1984. If you don't know, that's also a book. It's about a totalitarian state, completely totalitarian, where there is a central state that controls everything. You're always being watched by Big Brother, by cameras. You don't have any freedom there, basically. And there is this big central power, this central government that wants as much power as it can. Now, this novel is different. This society is different, and I think that it is much more descriptive of today's society and much more realistic. And I think that we're heading towards this one. Brave New World depicts a world where everyone is happy. And it's really about how a liberal democracy can really drug itself into tyranny. Because you see, one of the main points here is a drug called soma, which people can take and everyone is happy. There are no after effects of this drug. In this book, it's described as Christianity without tears. Small dosage gives you great feeling, a bigger dosage gives you hallucinations and you get a good sleep. And you see, it describes a society that is completely stable, a consumer society, completely stable. There are no crimes, no wars. People sleep well at night. People don't have to worry about old age or getting weaker as they get older. They figured that out. Technology is great there. They have all sorts of sensational amusements and distractions. These like 3D movies. They are called feelies in the book, which basically just focuses on sensational amusements. And everyone is happy here. Everyone can sleep with everyone else. There are no such things as family here. Everyone belongs to everyone else. This is one of the slogans that people in this society believe in, or they are conditioned to believe in this. We'll talk about this later. But everyone is happy here. But at the same time, there's something off. Everything is stable, but there's something off. Because they had to trade quite a lot of things for the stability. For example, family, as we said, there are no families in this society. Babies are literally made in a lab. And they can even be cloned. There are no fathers, no mothers. And people can't vote in this society. There is no religion. There is no higher or fine art in this world. Books are prohibited. History has been wiped out. People are just made to be focus on the present moment and on the present sensations and comfort, the present pleasure. That's really what's in the focus here. Pleasure, and the state is making people distracted from what is really going on around them. With all these distractions, with providing them with comfort. And in this world, people are divided into castes. Basically like different groups. There are at the tops the alphas, then the betas, the deltas, the gammas, and the epsilons. And they have been born into this caste. These castes. And how it works is they chemically alter the babies to make them smarter into alphas or make them stupid into epsilons, just mere workers. They don't need intelligence. So we just won't give them intelligence. We'll condition them. And it's such an interest. We'll get into the conditioning later in the videos. but they had to sacrifice ultimately for the stability, the people's freedom. It's like, give us your freedom and we'll give you a pill and we'll make you happy. But they had to give up the freedom of speech and the freedom of thought, really, of free thought and individual choice. And they have to really give up also the freedom of exploring life in its fullest depths. Because you see, in this world, there is no suffering, there is no books, there are no, these classical novels like these. It's like really a shallow world where the only point for you is to be comfortable and have sex with everyone else, have these great group orgies. But there's something off about this, isn't it? And there will be also another character that brings this up in the book. So yeah, the sacrifice that they made is freedom. They are bounded and chained by their desires and by the drugs given to them. The people here are made submissive using these drugs and all these distractions so that they don't notice what's going on around them. The state maximizes their comfort so that they don't question the state that they are in. And you see, the principles of this society is consumerism, to consume as much, promiscuity. I still don't know really how to spell this word. Promiscuity, groupthink, where people are conditioned to think alike, basically. As we said, giving up the freedom of thinking freely for yourself. A rejection of solitude, because if you're alone, that could lead to instability in the social system. And another one is discrimination for the other caste. And you see, one of the open books, as we said, one of the open questions in this book is it really as dystopian as Huxley makes it out to be? I mean, someone reading it today might read this and actually like this world. And we can actually see some very similar things in this book, in our world. I mean, we are also living in a consumer society. By advertisements and all sorts of stuff, we are made to consume more and more and more, just like in this book. And you see also bioengineering and technology is really advancing at a fast pace. We can't chemically change children and destine them before they are alive, like in this book. But it's really advancing. And also, we also have instant gratification. Our world is also, maximizing comfort. I mean, if you want to, you could live your life in maximum comfort from a comfortable house, going to, a car that is preheated for you. The seats are warm, even the handles are warm for you. So you have the option for maximum comfort, for instant gratification, just like in this book. There's also the possibility of, like in this book, you see, as we said, everyone belongs to everyone. People can sleep with whoever they want. We don't have that quite yet, but we have porn. Whenever you want, you can flip out your phone and watch porn. And it has been shown in studies that watching porn activates similar chemicals in your brain when you're actually having sex. So we're getting close to that, especially with virtual reality and all of that stuff. We're really getting close to that. And also, this whole hookup culture is becoming really popular, and sleeping with everyone. It's becoming normal to have multiple body counts before settling. And isn't it interesting that the steps of a relationship have almost been flipped? And by this I mean, well, in the past it used to be that you meet someone, you develop an emotional bond with them, you marry them, and then you have sex. But now it's completely flipped on its head. First, nowadays you have sex with someone, then maybe you develop an emotional bond with them, and maybe you marry them or live with them for the rest of your life. So I think that we are headed in that direction, maximizing comfort. And about the conditioning, you see, we are also being conditioned. I mean, what is advertising if not behavioral conditioning, making us want to buy more and more and more, making us think that, oh, you'll be happy if you'd have this one, always making us chase the future and be conditioning us to think that there is this something around the corner. Just buy it, just consume more. And of course, this book has the soma, the drug. I mean, aren't we drugged up? In America, what am I talking? In America, 60%, around 60% of the people are on some kind of medical drug, some kind of mood stabilizer. 1 in 3 people. And there's a huge opioid crisis there also. We are also drugged up. Everyone has their kind of drugs. There are all sorts of drugs that one can use to escape from reality. And about the caste, well, I think that we are also headed with there. I mean, if you have the luxury to watch this video, you're probably an alpha, at the top. There are people at the cobbled mines, for example, grinding away, killing themselves for the people making them work all day long. They are basically in slavery so that you can have your phone that you're watching this on right now, or your device. So the alphas and the epsilons. We are basically living in comfort. We don't have that much struggle. I mean, war also, for example, is really a spectacle for most of the world. I mean, for the alphas, let's say, who has the privilege of living in such a comfortable world. We watch the war. War is something that we just watch on TV. It's happening in another country. It doesn't affect us. So I think that there is this caste system kind of developing. Of course, it's not like in the book, but it's similar. It's never going to be exactly like in the book, but it is there. We can see very similar things in the book and in the real world. As we said, with drugs, with even birth control pills. There's also a version of this in the book, and promoting promiscuity and all of that. Very interesting. And another open question of the book is whether or not you have to sacrifice all of these things that we said, family, religion, art, and all of the things for social stability. Do you need to sacrifice humans' higher, the higher achievements or aspirations of human beings? Do you need to sacrifice that for social stability? And when it really comes down to it, this is what's odd about this society, that it feels like people are really being treated like animals. So that was a basic overview of the ideas behind this book and what it's kind of about, without giving away too much. And if you want to read this book, I highly recommend it. But now we're going to do some spoilers. We'll go on from the beginning and discuss the ideas and what this book is about. And if you're interested, there's also a series about this book on Netflix. It's pretty good. It's different from the book. It's not the same, but it takes a different approach. But I also liked it. And there's a more bigger role of AI in that world, while here it's not really mentioned. But in the book, we start out in the Hatchery and Conditioning Center. This is where basically the babies are made. And there is this director, some person on a pretty high position, and he takes these alpha plus or alpha students to learn about this hatching center. And here, babies are literally made in a test tube. And there's this great conveyor belt that is moving very, very slowly. And, it has the babies in them, and people are, putting chemicals in them. And this is where the castes start to appear. This is where babies are predestined into their caste. For example, alphas are made more tall, more muscular, more intelligent, and epsilons are made more stupid. They are the kind of the work or the backbone of the society, but they don't really need intelligence. They're just workers. The physiology of the babies are changed chemically. The eggs are fertilized in the test tubes, and in goes that, and on the other out comes a baby. And they even done this process where they can clone a person, like 72 or 96 times. So the same person, most of the time they do this with lower caste people like the epsilons. They look the same. 76 people, same clothes, looking the same, thinking the same. And of course, because of this, there is no family. Why? Why would they wouldn't want family? Because family can make the state unstable. Because family is something that you get attached to, that you love, and you can put family before the state. So you can rebel against the state if they threaten the family or something like that. So it can be an unstable element. And this also makes, promiscuity much more easier, which is one of the main things in this book. And also one of the interesting things in this book is that people are conditioned to kind of be disgusted towards the idea of family and of a home. To quote from the book, the director said that home, a few small rooms, stiflingly over-inhabited by a man, by a periodically teeming woman, by a rebel of boys and girls of all ages. No air, no space, an unsterilized prison, darkness, disease, and smells. The controller's evocation was so vivid that one of the boys, more sensitive than the rest, turned pale at the mere description and was on the point of being sick. And the director goes on to say that our Ford, or our Freud, as for some inscrutable reason he chose to call himself whenever he spoke of psychological matters, our Freud had been the first to reveal the appalling dangers of family life. The world was full of fathers, was therefore full of misery, full of mothers, therefore of every kind of perversion, from sadism to chastity, full of brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, full of madness and suicide. And this Ford is basically the guy that they worship, but not really worship, but for example, instead of saying my God, they say my Ford, for example. And I think this refers to Harrison Ford, who started this whole process of automation, just like they automate babies in this society. Now, the next place that we get introduced to in the book is the Neo-Pavlovian Conditioning Rooms. And you see this Pavlovian conditioning. You've probably heard of the example where they conditioned a dog to start salviating at the click of a sound. I mean, that's a very popular experience. But here we see, this is very weird. Yet again, we are with the director and a group of students, and he shows them how they condition infants, little children, to hate flowers and books by electrocuting them at the sight of those. So literally, they bring in the children. They show them a bunch of beautiful flowers and books, and as they start approaching it and touching them and seeing what's up, they start shocking them, literally electrocuting them. Like, brrr. It's so weird. And you see, they do this to condition those little babies to hate flowers and books. And by the way, they do this to epsilons, the lower class people, the worker class. And the director said that they'll grow up with what the psychologists used to call an instinctive hatred of books and flowers, reflexless, unalterably conditioned. They'll be safe from books and botany all their lives. So yet again, this idea that you can recondition this kind of instinctual things of these instincts of human beings, and really conditioning is what matters, is a key point in this book, and you can condition people to whatever you like, whatever the state likes. This is also a lot of psychologists, when researching this book, I have seen that they have warned also of the bad uses, the malevolent uses of psychology, just like shown in this example, where people are being conditioned, also by advertising, conditioning them to all this and that, what the state wants. Now you might be asking, okay, but why would they even condition these children to hate books and flowers? Well, see, let's take books, for example. Well, you see, reading books is really a waste of community time. They could be in the factory instead. And of course, there is the possibility of reading something dangerous and possibly the deconditioning them and making them more unstable. By reading something and reading basically can invoke strong emotions, and that is unstable. We don't want that in this state. But what about flowers? A student actually asked this question in the book, and the director says that it is because it is on the grounds of economic policy. Basically, that the state needs consumers, not people, enjoying the nature. That doesn't cost anything. And the director explained that at first, they actually conditioned epsilons to like flowers so that they would go out to the countryside and consume transport. But what they realized is that, the love of nature is free. You don't consume anything for that, and it wastes time. So they reconditioned them, but then of course they still wanted them to consume transport, to go to the countryside. So what they did is they conditioned them to hate nature, but at the same time love the countryside sports. So they would, go out there even though they hate flowers and all of this stuff, to consume transport and to consume, like the equipment that you need for that sport. So it's all about, consuming. And what I think and what I thought of why they do this is to to make them not like beauty, to make them be appalled by beauty. Because as we said again, beauty invokes in you strong emotions, and it makes you have this sense of awe. But as it says in the book, but that's a waste of time, that's a waste of community time, and it could lead to the instability of the social body, of the society. So when I first read this, it was pretty weird, you know, shocking babies to make them hate flowers and books. And when you think about this, we're also being shocked all the time by the device that you're watching this right now, by those notifications. You know, we get a notification, it's like we get shocked like that. You know, when we get a notification, it has been shown by studies, we get this little hit of dopamine. We lose our attention. It distracts us from what life is really about, what makes life worth living, really. Exploring life through books and finding awe in it through the beauty of nature. And of course, conditioning us to advertising, make us want things that we don't really want. And another interesting idea is that you don't need to feel conditioned to be conditioned. And now if you thought that conditioning children by shocking them wasn't enough, well, there's another way. They also condition them by playing tapes to them while they are sleeping. They literally, what they do is, while the children are sleeping, there's this small little voice just speaks to their head, telling them all sorts of propaganda, really, what the state wants them to believe. And the idea behind this is that what they hear in their sleep, they will like repeat that like parrots and come to believe it blindly. And here is an example of what one of those recordings says. It says that alpha children wear gray. They work much harder than we do because they're so frightfully clever. I'm really awfully glad I'm a beta, because I don't work so hard. And then we are much better than the gammas and deltas. Gammas are stupid. They all wear green, and delta children wear khaki. Oh no, I don't want to play with delta children, and epsilons are still worse. They are too stupid to be able to read or write. Besides, they wear black, which is such a beastly color. I'm so glad I'm a beta. So these little children get these kind of messages, this propaganda by the state, almost every single time while they are sleeping. In fact, I actually wrote it down. It says that they'll have that repeated 40 or 50 times more before they wake. Then again on Thursday and again on Saturday, 120 times, 3 times a week for 30 months. After which they go on to more advanced lessons. So this is how another way they condition. Another one of these conditions that they tell to people that everyone belongs to everyone else. So this is where we see that the state conditions the people to be happy in their caste. As we see in this book, it says that I'm so glad that I'm a beta. And it creates this hierarchy that, you know, the alphas are so clever and the epsilons, they're so stupid, I don't want to play with them. But at the same time, the epsilons are probably getting some other kind of conditioning. Oh, I'm so glad I'm an epsilon. So everyone is conditioned to accept their destiny and be happy in their the cards that they've been dealt with. You see, one of the very interesting things is also in this book, the people realize that it's key to start conditioning children at an early age. And we also see this happening today. I mean, you know, by hijacking the educational system, and, you know, teaching in schools about all of this crazy stuff about, you know, all of these genders and probably seen these books. I mean, I might be cancelled for this, but and also all these cartoons where they talk about being non-binary and all sorts of that, conditioning children at a young age, because that's when they're most submissive, most acceptable of these ideas and these conditionings. And now, if you thought that this conditioning wasn't enough, let's go on with the story, where we see a child, you know, being brought somewhere by a nurse because he wouldn't want to participate in child's erotic play. Yep, you heard it right. They also condition children to see sex and eroticism as normal. That they are out there, butt-ass naked, playing with each other. Well, I mean, when I read this, it was so weird. This is also so interesting that they look at children as sexual beings. And then when I was researching this video, I also found some kind of liberal philosopher, thinker, I don't know, who also taught this idea that about also taught this that children are sexual beings, and that they need to fulfill this for them to achieve their to fulfill their highest self or something like that. I'm not sure, but it's so weird, and this is also happening kind of today, isn't it? There's so many news about trans kids and all of that stuff. That just doesn't exist. There was no such thing as a trans kid, trans 6 years old, because they only develop a sexual orientation when they hit puberty. So yeah, this is very weird. As we said in this book, there is no monogamy. That's completely weird. So this is also a way to condition them to accept promiscuity and to sleep with everyone that they want and to just fulfill their pleasures whenever they like to. And as we said before, we can also see this kind of conditioning in children today. I mean, when was the first time you stumbled upon porn? Probably pretty young. I mean, I think kids today are starting to watch that like at 11 years old or something like that. And we are also, because of this, you see, it accentuates the pleasure side and the violent side of sex. And, it also makes us to accept more this hookup culture and to sleep with everyone, as many people as we can. And as we said, it's becoming normal to have a high body count before you settle. So I'm back. My phone died while recording this video. So another day of recording. And we left off talking about trans kids and their erotic child play, and how we are also exposed at a very young age to pornography, getting used to promiscuity. And I forgot to mention a quote from the book where the director talks about our world. It says in the book that he let out the amazing truth. For a very long period before the time of our Ford, and even for some generation afterwards, erotic play between children had been regarded as abnormal. There was a roar of laughter. And not only abnormal, actually immoral, no, and had therefore been rigorously suppressed. So you see, it's very interesting. And it looks on, you see, it says, a look of astonishment, incredulity appeared on the faces of his listeners. Poor little kids, not allowed to amuse themselves. They could not believe it. And it's interesting because we see this kind of narrative even today. Oh, let the kids have fun. Oh, it is just amusement. And it says that even adolescents, the DHC was saying, even adolescents like yourself, not possible, barring a little surreptitious, I don't know what it means, autoerotism and homosexuality, absolutely nothing. Nothing. In most cases, till they were over 20 years old. 20 years old. 20. I told you, you'll find it incredible. So very interesting. This quote shows the attitude towards sexuality of this society. That they've been conditioned ever since they were a child to think that this is normal, that they need this. And they do this also to distract them from what's going on around them, as we said. And as we said, this is becoming more and more popular in our world also, the hookup culture and everything. And watching pornography and all of that at a very young age. But now going on with the story, I'm going to give you a quick summary. I'll try to make it quick. We get introduced to one of the main characters, Bernard Marx, who is an alpha plus. And it's interesting with him because he finds himself drawn to the society, but at the same time he's repulsed by the promiscuity around him. So he's caught between these two conflicting desires to reject the new world society and the desire to be embraced by it, to join it, and to do all of that. And very often, when they have these kind of group orgies, he's repulsed by it. He doesn't enjoy it, and he lies to other people about, oh yeah, it was great and all of that. And one of the other things about Bernard Marx is that he feels this kind of insecurity because he can't fulfill his status as an alpha plus, because there has been a rumor that he got alcohol put into his chemical before he was born, basically while he was developing as a fetus. They accidentally put some alcohol in it, and he came out as a shorter person, which is a pretty big thing in this society, because being tall and being muscular is associated with power and with alphas. So he feels insecure about this, and thus he feels isolated. And he feels resentful because girls don't want to sleep with him. He's not popular with the girls. People find him antisocial, and he's standing out of the crowd. And Bernard also has the feeling for stronger emotions. It feels like that this world is shallow. These feelies and these movies and these orgies, it's all shallow. He yearns for something stronger, something deeper. And I also want to mention these group orgies that they have and give a little description of them, because it's very weird. Basically, they go to a room and sit in a circle, take soma, take drugs, and just have an orgy. And it's very weird. They have these, like, it's almost like a techno party. They have this kind of drumming music and lights and everything. And they start chanting, actually. And they say things like this, like come greater being, social friend, annihilating 12 in one, we long to die, for when we end, our large life has but begun. Feel how the great being comes, rejoice, and in rejoicing die, melt in the music of the drums, for I am you and you are I. Orgy porgy, this is what they call this group orgy porgy, for them fun, kiss the girls and make them one, boys at one, with girls at peace, orgy porgy gives release. So I just wanted to mention this. It's a very weird, really. It's almost cultish, like this ritualistic. So yeah, it's very interesting. And then we get introduced to Bernard's friend, Walt Helmholtz, or something like Helmholtz, yeah, who is a writer. He's the opposite of Marx. He's tall, muscular, he's popular amongst girls. He's a writer, but his problem is that he doesn't find something good to write about, something deep to write about. He has this feeling that he's writing about nothing at all. That, he writes about things like advertisements and nothing really, nothing deep. And he yearns for beauty, he yearns for truth, but which of course he can't find in this brave new world where books are prohibited, where history doesn't exist, where the whole purpose of it is to enjoy today's pleasure and orgies and sexual pleasures. And then we get introduced to another character called Lenina Crown, who is a beta plus, works at the Hatchery Center, and he finds herself drawn towards monogamy. That's very interesting, even though he fulfills the pleasure principle of sleeping with everyone. And just as a side note, it's very interesting when Lenina is talking to one of her girlfriends, she mentions that, he'd been seeing a guy for a month, and her girlfriend looks at her like, a month? Don't you think that's a little bit too long? Don't you think that you should be a bit more promiscuous, sleeping with other people? But it's very interesting the way they look at all the monogamy as something not good at all, so something they should reject. And then going on with the story, I won't really go into detail, but to bring out the main actions, Bernard and Lenina, want to go on a date, let's say. And they want to visit the Savage Reservation. And the Savage Reservation is a different kind of society that hasn't, changed with technology, and it's kind of like old school. There's poverty there. People get old. They hunt their food, and there's cultural activities there, which are banned in the New World. And they want to go there, see some savages, they call them, those kind of people. And they get the permit to go there. They go to the director, and Bernard finds out that the director was there at the Savages once, and she lost the girl there. I mean, he lost the girl there. That one night, a girl just disappeared that the director, who the director went with, and he came back without her. This will be important later. And they go to the Savages, and it's very interesting how they see the Savages, because you see, they never experienced old age before, or saw the effects of old age, the weakening effects of old age, and they never saw, fat people or dirtiness, disease, dust. That doesn't exist in their world. And then, stray dogs trash around. It's very interesting how they react to that. And there are some rituals there, religion and all of that. And there they meet a girl named Linda, who is actually the girl who the director lost there at the Savage Reservation. And this Linda, she is fat. She's enormous. It describes her in the book as a fat monster, with grease on her eyes and saggy face and all of that. But she had a child, and This child's name is John, which will be a very important character going on. Uh, John grew up there at the Savage Reservation, but her mother Linda also taught her how to read, and there he found a book of Shakespeare's, and he read those. He grew up upon those, trying to read those, even though he didn't understand a lot of the words. He was taught there how to hunt and all of that, but still John was kind of an outcast there because most of the people were brown there, brown skin colored, and he was more of a whitish, I think. I'm not sure, but he wasn't really accepted by the savages there. So Bernard brings John back to the New World, and this is where things get interesting, because while Bernard was at the Savage Reservation, the director made a decision to send Bernard away from the New World to a distant island as a kind of a punishment for his antisocial behavior. But with John, Bernard has a trick up his sleeve, because he connected the dots that John was actually the director's son, and Linda was, of course, a girl who got lost there at the Savage Reservations. So when Bernard gets back, there's this big big event where the director meets him, and he calls in Linda, and it's a huge shock for everyone. They are in this hatchery room, and the people are making the embryos and all of that. So there's quite a lot of people around there, alphas and betas, and it's a very humiliating moment for the director, because Linda comes in and she's fat. Let me just read you a quote from the book. It's on page 130, how it describes Linda when the people of the New World see her for the first time. It says that there was a gasp, a murmur of astonishment and horror. A young girl screamed, standing on a chair to get a better view of someone upset, two tests full of spermatozoa. Bloated, sagging, and among those firm, youthful bodies, those undistorted faces, a strange and terrifying monster of middle-agedness, Linda advanced into the room, coquettishly smiling her broken and discolored smile, and rolling as she walked, with what was meant to be a voluptuous undulation, her enormous haunches. So he's seen as really a fat monster, as some kind of alien, really. And then John comes in also. Linda goes to the director. Oh, my sweet director, or Tomakin, as he calls him by his name. And people are looking at, oh, what is happening? And then the interesting part comes when John comes in. Because as we said before, there are no fathers, there are no mothers in this world. That is something obscene. That is something weird. And when John comes there, and runs to the director and tells him, my father, and people just start laughing when John said this, completely full of laughter. And at this, the director is completely humiliated and runs out of the room with his hands on his ears, trying to block out that laughter. And after this, Bernard becomes very popular because people didn't really see savages there in the New World. And things happen. Bernard gets really drunk on this popularity. It gets really to his head. And what's interesting, that John, the savage, and Lenina start developing feelings for each other. John, well, actually, he was looking at Lenina and developing feelings all the way back when they were at the Savage Reservation. But there is this one key moment in the book where they are alone in a room, and John confesses to Lenina that she loves her. And Lenina, you see, she's not used to monogamy and dating like this. But John, that's what he expects, to fight for a girl, to this kind of courtesy you see. But the very interesting thing happens, that Lenina just starts stripping down in front of John when she tells her that he loves her, and she starts stripping down. And at that moment, you see, John was not used to this, and John starts calling her an impudent strumpet. I had to Google this like 1,000 times, which means a shameless slut, a shameless hoe, and he just starts yelling at Lenina, and Lenina gets really scared, they were about to get freaky, but John just freaked out that this is not how it's supposed to be, and you're a slut, a shameless slut. And Lenina goes to the bathroom and hides from John, and it's this interaction is very interesting. And then John gets a call from the hospital that Linda, his mother, is dying. So he goes there, finds Linda there, and this is very interesting because Linda there is completely drugged up. It's almost like she is not even there. He is stuffed with soma. And actually, let me read you a quote, the description of Linda while she is in the hospital. It's on the page 175. It reads that Linda was lying in the last of the long rows of beds next to the wall. Linda looked on, vaguely and uncomprehendingly smiling. Her pale, bloated face wore an expression of imbecile happiness. Every now and then, her eyelids closed, and for a few seconds, she seemed to be dozing. Then, with a little start, she would wake up to the aquarium antics of the tennis championships, to the Supervox Vultizeriania rendering of Hug Me Till You Drug Me Honey, which is basically like a song there, to the warm draught of verbena that came blowing through the ventilator above her head. Would wake to these things, or rather to the dream of these things, transformed and embellished by the soma in her blood, were the marvelous constituents, and smile once more her broken and discolored smile of infantile contentment. So she is just completely drugged up. And it's very interesting. John tries to talk to her, communicate with her, but she just doesn't seem to notice him. He keeps dreaming about, in this drugged up state, about the lover that she had back at the Savage Island. And it's very weird, John going there to his dying mother, not really being able to communicate it with her. Linda is just there lying, drugged up, watching the TV, being in total comfort, being entertained all the time, not even being conscious really. She's totally drugged up, and then some kids come around, cloned kids, these epsilons, who like bunch of them looking the same, and they are on death conditioning, where they condition them to look at death as something normal. And the kids go there and they are being very disrespectful to John and Linda, pointing at Linda and saying, why is she so fat? Why is she so ugly? And is she dying? And all of that. John gets angry, hits one of the kids. The nurse comes, what are you doing? And all of that. And then Linda dies, and it's a pretty sad moment there. It's Huxley really has a great ability to describe these kind of moments and give that feeling to you. And then John gets he's full of strong emotions and starts like a mini revolution or mini riot. He goes out to the lobby in the hospital where people are being handed out, the daily soma ratio is being handed out to the workers, these lower caste epsilons or deltas. And John just takes the soma and starts throwing them out of the window. And because of this, the people get angry and start attacking John actually. And it's very somehow Bernard and Helmut end up there. I don't remember how, but John starts yelling at them and saying, "You don't need this. You don't need to throw all of this out. Society doesn't need this. You don't need to be happy all the time. This steals lives away from you," and something like that. And then police come around, and it's very interesting that they stop all this with soma vapor. You see, even like stopping riots, they don't do that with violence. They do that with pleasure. You see, conditioning people and making them submissive and controlling them through the use of pleasure. Very interesting. And then they get brought to the world controller. And this is where things get interesting, because here is really a dialogue between Bernard Helmholtz, John, and the world controller, Mustafa Mond, who is basically like the boss. And they really just discuss the whole of society. Things like, why is there no religion? What about fine art? Why do we have to have these caste systems. So let's talk about those. It's very interesting. It's really packed with a lot of interesting ideas. So let's start dissecting them. So one of the things that John and Mustafa Mann, the world controller, talk about is why the caste system? Why do we need people split into different groups? And the world controller responds by saying that the optimum society is based on the iceberg model. You know, a few people on the top, the alphas, and a lot more at the bottom, the epsilon semi-morons, and the workers, the backbone of the world. And he says that John asks, then why couldn't we just have everyone as an alpha double plus? Well, the world controller responds by saying that if that society would just crumble, that alphas with their intelligence would hate the kind of work that they would have to do as workers in the factory. And he said that they actually tried an experiment where they sent off a bunch of alphas to a separate island to just start their own society. And after a couple of months, it crumbled. And there were revolutions, protests, and all of that. And that at the end, the rest of the alphas who survived that experiment, desired to go back to the new world and wanted to go back. And John asked that, okay, the optimum society is based on the iceberg model, but what about the people at the bottom? Are they, happy even there? And this is how the world controller responded. Happier than above. Happier than your friends here, for example. In spite of that awful work, awful, they don't find it so. On the contrary, they like it. It's light, it's childishly simple. No strain on the mind or the muscles. 7.5 hours of mild, unexhausting labor. And then the soma ration and games and unrestricted copulation and the feelies. What more can they ask for? True, they might ask for shorter hours, and of course we could give them shorter hours. Technically, it would be perfectly simple to reduce all lower cost working hours to 3 or 4 a day. But would they be any happier for that? No, they wouldn't. The experiment was tried more than a century and a half ago. The whole of Ireland was put on the 4-hour day. What was the result? Unrest and a large increase in the consumption of soma. That was all. Those 3.5 hours of extra leisure were so far from being a source of happiness that people felt constrained to take a holiday from them. Another thing that they discuss is how, having this stable society made science impossible. Because the type of science that they do is not real science there. Science is a big part of this technologically advanced society, but they stopped really truly advancing in science because it can bring discoveries that could be unstable to the social body and to society. And the world controller says that they are not doing real science, that they only have this cookbook in science and they have to follow the rules and they can't really do any real experimentation. And another topic that gets brought up between these guys is why they had to ban fine art and why they don't have, art and great novels and why they had to ban books like Shakespeare and all of that. And the world controller says that mainly because they are old and they don't want people attracted to old stuff, and also because they are beautiful. People can find beauty in that, and they also don't want to have people attracted to that because that can lead to strong emotions, which then thus lead to instability. And another very interesting thing that they mention is how people just wouldn't understand things like they mention Othello, one of Shakespeare's work. People just wouldn't understand it because it's a new world. Because you see, he says that in a book, for there be tragedy in a book, to have tragedy and these great stories, there needs to be instability. Something to fight for, a love to fight for, a nation to fight for. But that just doesn't exist in this world. Everyone's happy, everyone's stable. Even if they wrote, a new Othello, a new great piece of art, people just wouldn't appreciate it and wouldn't understand it really. You see, one of the examples, John brought back Shakespeare with him. And he explained and told the story of Romeo and Juliet to Bernard and Helmut. And they just couldn't understand it. They started laughing at those stories. When one of them dies or they kill themselves, they couldn't really understand. They don't understand those strong feelings because they never had to experience those before. There's complete stability. They never had to fight for love. They don't understand the concept of monogamy and being restricted from loving the person that you truly love. They don't have those kind of ideas. As Mustafa Mons says in the book, they ask why couldn't the Helmos asked, why not? Why can't we have these pieces of art like Othello? And Mustafa responded, because our world is not the same as Othello's world. You can't make flavors without steel, and you can't make tragedies without social instability. The world's stable now. People are happy. They get what they want, and they never want what they can't get. They're well off, they're safe, they're never ill, they're not afraid of death, they're blissfully ignorant of passion and old age, they're plagued with no mothers or fathers. They got no wives or children or lovers to feel strongly about. They're so conditioned that they practically can't help behaving as they ought to behave. And if anything should go wrong, there's Soma, which you could go and chuck out of the window in this name of liberty, Mr. Savage. Liberty, he laughed, expecting Daltas to know what liberty is, and now expecting them to understand Othello. My good boy. You see, this is the thing that they just couldn't understand this fine art. It's very interesting. So, of course, they had to ban Shakespeare and all of this. Now, the next very interesting topic that they talk about is God. Why is there no God in this world? Why is there no religion? And the world controller replies that, for the same reason that we don't share books with them, because they are old. And they wouldn't really understand it. They are old. John replies, okay, they are old, but God never changes. But the world controller says, well, yes, God doesn't change, but men do. And that makes all the difference. And he argues that there is no place for God in this society because he says that we can only be independent of God when we are young and prosperous. When we don't have many troubles, we are distracted by things, the passions are alive, and we have all sorts of desires. And that we develop the religious sentiment as we grow older, as death comes nearer to us, and as our passions weaken and we desire less, and as we we get older, we get more contemplative. But the thing is that people just don't get older anymore. People always have all sorts of distractions. They are always distracted. They have stability. They don't fear that. They've been conditioned to not fear that. And because of this, there is now no place for God. That people are young now and prosperous to the very end. And he also says in the book that this religious sentiment helps people to make up for all of their losses. But there are no losses to make up for in this world. Everybody is happy. And he says, and Mustafa Moon, the world controller, says this in the book. He reads from a book, from the Bible, I'm not sure, that you can only be independent of God while you've got the youth and prosperity. Independence won't take you safely to the end. And Mustafa says, well, now we got youth and prosperity right up to the end. What follows? Evidently, that we can be independent of the God. He then reads, the religious sentiment will compensate us for all our losses. And Mustafa says, but there aren't any losses for us to compensate. Religious sentiment is superfluous. And why would we go hunting for a substitute for youthful desires, when youthful desires never fail? A substitute for distractions, when we go on enjoying all the old fooleries to the very last. What need we have of repose when our minds and bodies continue to delight in activity, of consolation when we have soma, of something immovable when there is the social order? And then John asks that, okay, then do you think that there is no God? Well, the control said that there is probably one, but it changes as men change. It used to be, says it used to be as this unmovable, authoritarian, how do you say it? Our image of God, it used to be that, and the big boss. But then in their world, he says that it turned to an image as something absent. It turned to a God as being absent, that it's not there. And then John says, you see, okay, but isn't it natural to have the feeling that there is a God when you're all alone by yourself? And the word controller replies that people are not alone anymore. We make sure we take the greatest care that they are not alone, that they are always with around people in social environments. It's almost impossible for them to be alone. And another very interesting topic that they talk about is, you see, John says here that, but God's the reason for everything noble and fine and heroic. And, talking about noble things and heroic things and fine things. But Mustafa responds that that heroism and noble things only exist in a society that is unstable, where there is something to fight for, when there are opposing teams to defend something. To quote, he says, "My dear young friend, civilization has absolutely no need of nobility and heroism. These things are only symptoms of political inefficiency. In a proper organized society like ours, nobody has any opportunity for being noble or heroic. Conditions have got to be thoroughly unstable before the occasion can arise. Where there are wars, where there are divided alliances, where there are temptations to be resisted, objects of love to be fought for or defended. There, obviously, nobility and heroism have some sense, but there aren't any words nowadays. The greatest care is taken to prevent you from loving anyone too much. There's no such thing as divided alliances. You're so conditioned that you can't help doing what you ought to do. And what you ought to do is on the whole so pleasant, so many of the natural impulses are allowed to free play that there really aren't any temptations to resist. And even if were, by some unlucky chance, anything unpleasant should somehow happen, why, there's always someone to give you a holiday from the facts. And there's always someone to calm your anger, to reconcile you to your enemies, to make you patient and long-suffering. In the past, you could only accomplish these things by making a great effort and after years of hard moral training. Now you swallow 2 or 3 half-gram tablets, and there you are. Anybody can be virtuous now. You can carry at least half your morality about in a puzzle. Christianity without tears. That's what Soma is. Yes, this is a great quote. And I also really like this, that the controller says that the greatest care is taken to prevent you from loving anyone too much. Because of course that leads to instability. That means that you put that person before the state and you would fight for that person. You would protect her. And then this one is probably my favorite quote from the book, that John talks about, that it's too easy for them. They get everything just like that. They abolished they abolished sufferings for something, and they abolished, resisting the suffering and fighting for something. And then they have it too easy. There's no fight for it. He gives an example of how in the savage world, before marrying a girl, they had to do some kind of hard thing, plowing the fields where there are a bunch of mosquitoes, and they will just eat them alive, by them. And Mustafa says that there are no mosquitoes here. Everyone is comfortable. But John's response to this, but isn't there something in living dangerously? Isn't there something in that? And the word controller responds, well, yes, there is, but they do it another way. He says that men and women must have their adrenals stimulated from time to time. It's one of the conditions of perfect health. That's why we made the VPS treatment compulsory. And here in this VPS treatment, he says that we flood the whole system with adrenaline. It's the complete psychological equivalent of fear and rage, all the tonic effects of murdering Desdemona and being murdered by Othello without any of the inconveniences. And here comes my favorite part, where John says, but I like inconveniences. We don't. We prefer to do things comfortably. And John says, but I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. In fact, said Mustafa Mon, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. All right then, said the savage, I'm claiming the right to be unhappy. It's very interesting. And it goes on to say, not to mention the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy and the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. There was a long silence. I claim them all, said the savage at last. So it's very interesting that the savage, being shown this word of comfort, opts for unhappiness, opts for sin, for suffering, for him to grow old and have all of his troubles and all the inconveniences that come with life. Because you see, John really thinks at the end that life is not worthwhile if he can't experience it to its depth, if it doesn't also include suffering and happiness, if it doesn't also include pain and pleasure. Very interesting. And now the end of the book is also very interesting. You see, Helmholtz and Bernard are sent to an island where these kind of people are sent, who are rebels, who don't fit in society. And the war controller says about this island that it's not a punishment, that it's really a reward. He's being sent to an island, that's to say, he's being sent to a place where he'll meet the most interesting set of men and women to be found anywhere in the world. All the people who, for one reason or another, have got too self-consciously individual to fit into community life. All the people who aren't satisfied with orthodoxy, who got independent ideas of their own. Everyone, in a word, who's anyone. I almost envy you, Mr. Watson. So they get sent to these ideas. Helmholtz requested to be sent on a harsh island so that he can suffer, so that he has inspiration to write about something, because out of suffering comes, great experiences and lessons and understanding and the things to write about. But John is not sent to an island. He's kept there for an experiment, so to say. He's sent to an island, a countryside, let's say, that is pretty close to civilization. And he has a very nice apartment, very nice place. It's like a lighthouse, I think. But when John gets there, he feels like he doesn't deserve this beauty. So he starts punishing himself, starts suffering, starts whipping himself. And he starts living there by himself, harvesting food, planting food, hunting, and all of that stuff. And at the same time, he's thinking of Lenina while he's there alone. And he starts punishing himself for having these kind of thoughts, whipping himself. And then once someone recorded him whipping himself and made a movie of it, and people loved it. He made one of these feelies, these 3D sensual cinematics, and people were crazy for it. So a bunch of people went out there to John, to his island, to the whole crowd surrounding John's lighthouse, and they started yelling, saying to him to start whipping yourself, whip yourself, and all of this stuff. And John, was it was pretty interesting for John. And the main thing is that Lenina also went there. If you remember, Lenina and John had feelings for each other. And just as a quick recap, that when Lenina stripped down in front of John, he called her an impudent strumpet, a shameless slut, and was on the verge of hitting her. But now Lenina showed up, and the anger that was built up in John, just came out, it overflowed, and he started, running towards Lenina and beating her with his whip, and calling her a shameless slut while he was beating her. And it's so weird here that everyone was watching. There was a big crowd of people, and people got so aroused by this violent action. Their minds are so messed up that they just started having a great orgy right there and then, while John was beating Lenina. They had a great orgy, and singing that orgy-porgy things that we talked about. And I think John also joined. And after this day, after this great orgy, John was so ashamed of himself, of what happened and all of this life and this brave new world, that he committed suicide. He hung himself. And that's how the book ends. That John didn't feel like life is not worth it if if sexual pleasure is all that matters, and comfort is all that matters. So yeah, it's a great read, and there are so many things that I haven't thought about that are present in this book, and I truly recommend it. I really recommend this book. It is great, and as we said, I think this is more realistic than 1984. That I think that our world is more likely to head in the direction of the Brave New World, where people are conditioned, and they are controlled, not using force, not using pain, but using pleasure, by dumbing people down, by conditioning them with, for example, television. It has been shown in studies that while we watch television, our critical thinking goes down, and we are more we are more submissive. We more easily get information and propaganda in. So it's very interesting. I highly recommend you to read the book. It's great. So yeah, that's about it. Some analyzing the book, quick summary of it. It's been fun making this video. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment. If you want a follow-up video, if you have any questions, I can make a video about a separate topic within the book. So yeah, I recommend this book to you. If you're interested, I have other videos to talk about. You can contact me at my email if you have any questions. So yeah, if you want to have a one-on-one call, there's also my email. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, all of that stuff. Have a great day. Goodbye.